Hi folks, I'm Spence, and on today's episode of Cult Mania, we're going to be talking about Irreversible. Dear God. Irreversible is a film by Gaspar Noe, which for a lot of people will tell you everything you need to know if you haven't already seen it. It was his second feature film and is classed as the end of a trilogy with one of his early short films, Carne, and then I Stand Alone, and then Irreversible. You don't need to have seen the other two. I hadn't. I still haven't seen I Stand Alone. Irreversible began life as a project between Noe and actors and real couple Monica Bellucci and Vincent Cassel, with the original idea being that they would play a couple in a film and would have unsimulated sex on screen. The couple ended up pulling out of that, which is very much fair, and Noe would actually revisit that idea much later on in his film Love. So, they still wanted to work together though. And Irreversible is what came out of it. Now, Irreversible, playing off the title, is played out in reverse. It's a story of revenge, and you start out with the revenge, and then go backwards to find out what happened, and to before the event happened. And now, this is where this review is going to get interesting, because I am going to be reviewing the original version, the theatrical cut, and the straight cut, which was a new version of the film that Noe released, has slowly been releasing, in which he's put the scenes back in the chronological order, so you start at the start and end at the end, rather than starting at the end and finishing at the start. So the review's going to be split in half. I will do my normal spoiler-free review of the theatrical cut, but the review of the straight cut, I'm going to treat it like anyone that's watching that either has no plans to watch Irreversible or has seen it, because you can't really discuss the differences and what makes it interesting as a reworked version without discussing the plot and the characters and basically spoiling it. But I will put a big wall of spoilers beyond this point. Also, it feels very, 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 very worth noting. This film is strong, so a content warning if you are planning to watch this film. 4. Cool, if that's not put you off, then let's talk about Irreversible. Now, it's very, very strange to attempt to discuss the plot of a film that is playing out backwards, because what you would normally give everyone as a setup is the stuff that you actually find out later on, presuming you are watching the standard cut. So that's quite strange. It's a really weird thing to sort of be discussing. Basically, the film is a rape revenge film, played out in reverse. And Monica Bellucci plays Alex, the woman who is assaulted in what is one of the most horrific scenes I've ever subjected myself to. And you have the revenge being enacted by Vincent Cassel's Marcus and Albert Dupontnew's Pierre. And fucking hell, this film does not hold back on anything. I'm not really going to discuss any more of the plot than that. Not in this section, because it's so much of obviously playing the film out in this strange, non-chronological order is that you are getting information in really strange places. But what is worth noting is this is a very, very well acted film. The performances in a film like this are absolutely fantastic. They feel incredibly, incredibly grounded. Noe has often used improvisation, and this is similar. And it really breathes life into these characters, and at no point, despite the fact that you are thrown into these characters right on the cusp of getting this horrific, violent revenge for this horrific crime that we don't know much about. You feel fully that whatever's going on must in some way be justified, but you can't fully justify it because you don't know what's going on. And you are seeing these characters at their most insanely enraged, hyperactive. Are they on drugs? Are they drunk? Is this just the pure emotion of vengeance coming out? And yet it doesn't feel. It feels disorienting and chaotic, but it doesn't feel overplayed, despite the fact that you don't know what's going on. And that goes for the rest of the film as well. When you're in the second half of the film, in which you are watching people be more normal, the performances are fantastic. There is a huge thing to be said for having Cassell and Bellucci act as a couple, because they were a couple and you can tell it's really obvious. Despite the fact that by the time you're actually at those scenes, you may well be just reeling from everything that you have seen before. And so much of the power of the film comes from just, it feels real. It's when the rape scene happens, it's horrific because you just feel like you are watching something genuinely happen, because there is nothing stagey about it. The performances don't feel over the top. It's horrific. I mean, Monica Bellucci deserves so much credit for the sheer vulnerability that she shows in that sequence. It's ridiculous, and I don't know. I think they shot it like 6 times. I don't know how she did it, but she did a fantastic job. And that is in part because each scene within the film, each time that you have a scene in which you jump back and then you play out the sequence, is a take. That's, this isn't a film that cuts around massively. Noé's done this for the vast majority of his films. He likes a good long take. And that is what we get here. And early in the film, it is disorientating. The camera swirls around. Literally, I think the opening of the film is literally just like these shots of buildings whizzing by the camera as it swings around. You have this moment in which you go through this club and it is just, you are just swinging around and you're just catching like glimpses of lights or of people or of genitalia or whatever. And for the first half of the film, the camera is just this freewheeling thing that is manipulating and round and swinging, and it's so chaotic, and I genuinely could probably give you motion sickness. But it puts you so much in this mood of just not knowing what you are doing. You are out of control. The camera is out of control, so you feel that sense that the characters have, and it just works. It's not going to be for everyone because it is disorientating, purposefully so. Even the scene transitions are often that a camera will swing up to the night sky and then come back down as if it's a wanna, which is just chaos. It's orchestrated chaos in the best possible way. And when you've got that married with characters shouting and screaming and just excessive anger merged with that camera work, it is beyond amazing. And then you get to a scene like the rape, which is just shot in one take, including the camera just gets put on the floor and you just sit and watch it. There is no editing and it goes on and on and on and on. And the camera doesn't let you look away, which is part of why it feels so real. And it is genuinely hard watching because you keep thinking, Jesus Christ, is this going to end yet? And then it just keeps going. and it's really weird because it's this jolt in the filmmaking, because you suddenly go from this chaos and swirling camera and people are coming like in and out to just this static inability to look away, and you feel it. You might not realise that that's what you're feeling, but it's that sudden, like, the camera was letting me be distracted before and now it's not. And then the rest of the film plays out in a much more, yes, it's still handheld and long takes, but it's much more conventional from that point on. The sound of the film is very interesting as well, because a lot of the music is diegetic. You go to a party and you hear dance music. Thomas Bangalter from Daft Punk did a lot of the music. There is a scene around the Revenge, which is one of the greatest pieces of music, in my opinion, that's been put in a film, because it is just this droning vroom, 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 with every now and again you get this sort of really sort of intense dance beat underneath, and I listen to it quite a lot when I'm writing, because it's just the whole sound design is just chaotic, because you have so much shouting and it feels like you are inescapably being overwhelmed by sound a lot of the time. Even if it's just dialogue, you aren't being aware of music. Even if there is music, you just sort of because it's coming from some part of the world. The thing is, tonally, Irreversible is bleak, nihilistic. There is a sequence right at the very, very start of the film that feels sort of weirdly disconnected, which features the butcher character from Carney and I Stand Alone, which feels a bit random, but it's this weird little scene that sets up the whole nihilistic tone of the film, and that is something that the film never loses. There is sequences that could, under someone else's control, be really could tonally mess up. There is a protracted sequence in the film in which people are trying to find a gay bar called the Rectum, and you have just people going, "Where is the Rectum?" And that could be fucking hilarious, because it's people saying the word rectum, and yet it doesn't. It never feels like it's slipping into that element. You are tonally, it's just hitting you over and over and over again. It is an assault watching this film. And the thing is, even once you get to everything going wrong, because you have this knowledge of everything that's come to be, even that it's almost like an emotional assault on you, because you are seeing a normal life, and that becomes equally horrific. I adore this film, which sounds like a stupid thing to say for a film that is as extreme as this, contains violence that is genuinely... I am not someone who looks away from stuff, and even rewatching the re-edited version, there are moments in which I had to force myself to keep my eyes on what's happening. It genuinely has moments in which, the first time I saw it, I was like, Jesus fuck! And I still did it this time. It has not lost any power on repeat viewing over time. It is a masterpiece that I cannot recommend to anyone. You have got to be a specific sort of audience member to want to watch Irreversible. I cannot recommend it enough, and I cannot recommend it. There are no other films like it. It is a completely unique film, in my opinion. And the thing is, for a film as disturbing as this, I watched it twice in 1 week and have now watched it multiple times, including the re-edited version and with commentary and stuff like that. And that's not, there are other films that I want to do that with, but I don't want to put myself through. This is so good. And I mean, yes, it's shocking. Yes, it has the gimmick of being played out backwards, but it's not a gimmick. It works. In flipping a revenge story, to have the revenge at the start with no explanation undermines the concept of revenge, and yet still you crave it. It's a great mirror to the audience. It's just fantastic. It really, really is. I can't say anything other than it's a masterpiece. It is Noe's masterpiece, and I've loved everything that he has made. And if you only see one of his films, this is the one to see, but be warned. It's a lot. Right. Now we move on to the straight cut. So if you have any inkling about watching Irreversible, go and watch the original cut. That is actually worth noting. Watch the theatrical cut first. The straight cut is interesting if you've seen the film. I would not recommend starting with the straight cut because you are depriving yourself of scenes and just the fantastically horrific experience of seeing Irreversible. So, spoiler warning starts now. So, the straight cut. This is Noe re-editing the film with, literally starting with the shot of Monica Bellucci at the park. Actually, it doesn't start with that. It starts with the fucking horrible flickering white light that the original version ends with. It's longer in this cut as well, so you cut from these black credits to a white screen strobing at you for about a minute, so Jesus. And the first thing you will notice about watching it in chronological order is you can appreciate the performances in the chronological early parts of the film. Notably the scene of Bellucci and Cassell naked in bed. Because you can tell that they were at that time they were in love with each other, and it comes through on screen, and you can just fully wrap yourself in their performance because it is improvised. There's a point in which he potentially squashes one of his testicles, and you don't know whether that actually was just part of the scene. That just happened. And it's amazing. And you are looking at two incredibly beautiful people having a nice time, and you just feel that because you aren't reeling from the shock of all of the events that are yet to come. You can just appreciate their acting. The film is amazingly acted, and I don't think anyone would really think that watching the other version because you are bombarded with so much. I think also having the very early scenes of Marcus showing that tender side, that's still cheeky but a bit more you are sort of ingratiated to him a bit more in the straight cut. You like him a bit more, whereas obviously you see him as this drug-fueled, homophobic, transphobic, racist, violent idiot later on, who is just enwrapped with guilt and pursuing violence. You get to see the tender side of him, and you see the transformation throughout the film a lot more, and you sort of understand why Alex is with him and why Pierre is happy to be out with his ex and her new partner. And then you slowly see his sort of character fall apart as the film goes on, which I don't think, because you judge him so much the other way around. And I think also it has a benefit of making Pierre seem a lot more likeable as well, because again, he's this person who's trying to stop the revenge happening, but we're sort of conditioned to want revenge because that's cinematic language. And you sort of roll with his character more because you understand where he's coming from. Whereas I think he's sort of this weird, annoying presence who also commits a fucking horrible act of violence in one of the most disturbing acts of violence I can remember on camera. But the big thing is, you get to know Alex before the rape. And that adds a great deal of impact to the rape scene, which is horrific. And I do think, gives you a very visceral response the first time you see it, because you all you've seen of Alex up until that point is her beaten up. You see her afterwards, and then you see the rape. And having that point at which you get to know her beforehand adds so much more emotion, and you know that she's pregnant, and it adds so much heartbreak to that sequence. And I think it's really interesting because that's at the same point in the film, because it's in the middle of the film. That doesn't move. You still have the same amount of time, or at least it feels like it. And of course, you're watching it for a sec. Like I said, I don't see any point in watching the straight cut if you've not seen the original cut. So you know it's coming, and it just makes everything feel horrible and disturbing and sad. There is a much greater feeling of sadness to the straight cut. And the other big thing is, it gives you a lot greater sight into that they fuck up at the end, that they kill the wrong guy. I think you could easily miss that in the straight cut, in the theatrical cut, sorry, because you are reeling from all these horrific events and this chaos, and you don't really know what's going on. You don't know who they are after, so you see the act happen and you just assume that is who they are after. And then if you've clocked it, you realise that they killed the wrong person, whereas it's a lot more obvious in the straight cut. And that just makes the ending even harder and more disturbing, because it was all pointless. I do think the straight cut does lose impact in its final moments, because it's cut down. It's 8 minutes shorter, and I had presumed that the missing 8 minutes would be the butcher. It isn't. It's actually that just a load of the scenes are condensed. Notably, in the rectum, you don't get a lot of the gay sex. You don't get that really disorientating sequence in which you spin round and you get like a shot of a cock and you see Gaspar Noe having a wank. You don't get all of that, and I think that's a real shame, because that is so disorientating and chaotic, and I think that whole sequence is fantastic. The two most powerful sequences should have been left unedited, and I'm really annoyed that the rectum bit is shorter, as well, because the butcher scene is this really weird coda that's not a coda to the film now. It's almost like someone explaining to you what you've seen, but it's not the final moment of the film, because you still get Marcus being put in the ambulance and Pierre being arrested. So it doesn't feel like, it's not got the same thing to it. It doesn't have the impact, because it's not the first thing you see, and it's not actually the last thing that you see. So it just doesn't quite work. overall, it's still very interesting to see because I think you do get to appreciate a lot more of the sort of technical qualities of it and the acting especially. But I wouldn't. It's not an essential watch. So there we go. It's a perfect film. I wouldn't change a single thing about it, which is kind of weird that I did watch the alternate version, which is interesting, but not essential. But it's such a fantastic film. It really is. Please, in the comments, let's have a discussion about Irreversible, because I could talk to anyone about it, despite the fact that, like I said, I can't recommend it to anyone. So, let me know down in the comments what you think of Irreversible, what you thought of the straight cut if you have seen it. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I shall see you next time.